After the Mega Man 1 through 3 video, I teased the review of the remakes on Sega Genesis. I did it again at the end of the fan game video, and one more time at the end of the DOS video. I know I'm pretty bad about this, but today, the teasing stops. I'm going into this video with a few questions. What is the Wily Wars? How does it compare to the originals? And whether or not it's worth your time. Before we do that, let's hear a word from our sponsor. This video is brought to you by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for anyone who loves learning and wants to explore their creativity and pick up new skills. There's a little something for everyone, as there may be multiple courses on similar topics, but vary in length and approach. I do a lot of standard reviews and editorials, but I've always wanted to experiment with videos that tell a story, rather than just critiquing the subject of the video. That's why I chose Thomas Daher's class on storytelling through film. I finished the course with a lot more than I was expecting to, and plan on putting these lessons to great use in the near future. Other benefits of Skillshare would be the ad-free viewing, so you can start a class and not have to worry about being forced to stop for a moment. Not only that, but being able to stop and continue at another time really helps if you suddenly need to tend to other things. If you're interested in discovering a new skill or refining a current skill, you can become a member with the link provided below this video. In fact, the first 1,000 people to use this link will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Give it a shot, and a huge thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring today's video. The NES titles were exclusive to the consoles until the numerous re-releases, but between the original release and the Japanese exclusive PS1 version, or for us, the Gen 6 Mega Man Anniversary Collection, 3 of the games were remade for the Sega Genesis. Prior to its release, it was actually leaked to gaming outlets, which, upon that discovery, gave me a bit of a chuckle as game leaks are even more prevalent these days. I was shocked at how early of a thing these were. The project was outsourced to Minakuchi Engineering, a company we'll become more familiar with in future videos, and according to Keiji Inafune, development was brutal. This led to outsiders wondering if the project would be cancelled, as the Sega Genesis had become a rather old machine by that time. The 5th generation of consoles had already begun, but was about to really get started with the release of the Sega Saturn and the Sony PlayStation in 1994. There was also the 3DO, being the earliest of the 5th generation consoles, releasing in 1993, but it flopped due to the high asking price, being too ahead of its time, as well as some other issues. The Wily Wars eventually made its way to store shelves in October 21st, 1994 in Japan, and April 3rd, 1995 in Europe. In the United States, the game was released through Sega Channel, a digital download service that is essentially a game subscription service. Think the Xbox Game Pass or PlayStation Now, but in the 90s. Due to the high price of the service, not many were able to experience the Sega Channel. Since then, the game has been re-released a few times, with varying results. In 2012, the mini-console developer At Games released a Sega Genesis flashback-style handheld that contained many official Sega Genesis titles, as well as games of lower quality to promote the high game count on the box. With all of my digging around, the black and cyan version of the handheld is the only one that has the Wily Wars included. This is where I have to confess that I didn't seek out this handheld. Not only are the prices of this handheld a little too much for my curiosity, as it would become a paperweight after this video, but the quality of the emulation is ass! Yeah, what he said. Not only that, but the version lacked any kind of save support, so part of the game became inaccessible. We'll get into that later. Fans looking for a quality re-release would have to wait a few more years, as Sega would release the Sega Genesis mini console in September of 2019. An $80 microconsole with over 40 titles, including this Mega Man release, and it came out to mostly positive reception. 2021 would see another re-release for this game, as for the first time a physical version of the Wily Wars would be released in the US by Retrobit for $70 US. 2022 would see the most recent re-release, as it is now available on the Nintendo Switch Online service through its expansion pack at $50 a year for the individual, or $85 for a family plan, making it come full circle with the game's original US release. In preparation for this review, I decided to play multiple versions of the game. The Japanese original, the Genesis Mini, and this version that I'm guessing is a ROM from the Retrobit release. Also, the Nintendo Switch Online release. Anyways, without further ado, let's talk about Mega Man: The Wily Wars. It's only a little redundant to describe the story of the individual games, as very little has changed with those, but the setup of the Wily Wars is that Dr. Wily has traveled back in time in his attempt to defeat Mega Man in one of those previous encounters. The Blue Bomber will use what he has learned for the final confrontation in the Wily Tower. This is something you wouldn't get from that intro, as it only shows Mega Man and Dr. Light, who are interrupted by all the Robot Masters and Wily. The collection is similar to that of Super Mario All-Stars, where all the games were given a massive overhaul to fit the more advanced system, with new sprites for all the characters, including one of my favorite looks for classic Mega Man. Now, this doesn't mean I hate the 8-bit sprite for Mega Man at all, I just find the eyes to be a little goofy, but it's still a classic. To deviate from the review, I practiced sprite animation in high school. I'm gonna say don't ask about them because I lost those files when my flash drive was stolen and I didn't have a PC at home, so a lot of work was lost. When I was browsing Google Images, Sprite Database, and Spriter's Resource, I came across the Mega Man sprites from this game, though I couldn't see where the sprite came from. Which is kinda silly for me to not dig a little deeper to find out where the source of it came from, but that's neither here nor there. As for the level elements and backgrounds, I think they're fine. I enjoy the extra detail, but I do feel like it came at the cost of the brighter colors of the original. If anything, Mega Man 1 is where the darker look is something I'm willing to accept since the game has been given decent looking backgrounds. The other thing I noticed as I was looking back at the game is that there are 4 different types of cloud sprites used in one game. Other cool additions would have to be the cracked platforms of Cutman stage, the distant cliffs of Gutsman stage, and the wave effect in Fireman stage. It's the little things I'm noticing that really add to this remake. Mega Man 2 receives a similar treatment, though with the game having more detail than the original, there was something to improve upon rather than coming up with original backgrounds. Only 3 kinds of cloudy backgrounds are used, but I bring this up because in Wily Stage 1, part of the cloud is cut off. Since we're on Mega Man 2, the obnoxious flashing is mostly gone. What remains of the flashing is less harsh, which I greatly appreciate. Same goes for Bubble Man's waterfalls, so I call that a win. Aside from Hard Man and Snake Man stages, Mega Man 3 is a good looking game, so that's all I got. I like what I see. While the graphics are mostly an improvement over the originals, I can't say the same for the music. NES Mega Man music is some top tier stuff. Even with the music that isn't as beloved, you still get a solid soundtrack. Something must have been lost when bringing this to the Genesis because this is not doing it for me. Even that Genesis twang, which is something that the system is known for, becomes grating at points. It's a shame because there are games like Street Fighter II Championship Edition, another Capcom Genesis release which is actually the reason that this game exists, was able to do a decent job with the source material. There are a few standout themes in the game, but it's not the same. The Wily Wars is pretty close to the NES game with its gameplay. To the casual player, not a lot will seem off, but there are a few things that I did take note of. There seems to be a slightly longer delay from Mega Man's short step to his full-on run. It threw me off a lot because I was so used to the NES titles, and I would have to readjust myself once in a while to go for a risky jump. I will say, for the longest time I assumed Mega Man 3 had some kind of delay between the slide and the jump. Turns out I was just messing that up because this thing is snappy as hell and I love it. Both in the original and in this game. My bad. Something that I am 100% sure is different is this section in Mega Man 2's first Wily stage. It's in this section where you have to use the Item 1 platform. I found it easier to bonk the ceiling and fall down, even though my experience with this game should enable me to go through it on the first try. One of the things I addressed in the reviews of the originals was how prevalent the slowdown was and how I used it to my advantage. Whether it's poor optimization or the limitations of the Sega Genesis or Mega Drive, the remakes have a significant amount of slowdown as well. And it baffles me because this is a late system release. You'd think they would know the limits of the hardware and make adjustments as needed. Before I continue, I'm gonna stop someone from saying this. You're playing on the European version. No, I'm not. Like I said at the start of the video, the first playthrough I did of this was an English ROM, which might be from the Genesis Mini or the Retrobit release. To be 100% sure, I played the Japanese version as well to see if there's any slowdown in this game, and that version's actually a bit worse. Electman's fight had moments of slowdown, and in the English version I played, it does not. I also goofed on the aspect ratio, which is why I don't want to show much of this footage. Just like the originals, the slowdown can be used to the player's benefit. The Yellow Devil's fight slows to a crawl, and this is how I was forced to learn the pattern because there's no pause trick. Where I would love to see this slowdown return is in the second Electman battle, because full speed is a thing of my nightmares. Even with my knowledge of the weaknesses, this was a constant roadblock for me in Mega Man 1. The bosses have been adjusted as well, and some of the changes make the player think twice about their strategy. The damage invincibility has been extended for them, increasing the difficulty of the Robot Masters. Mega Man 2 is based on the difficult option, so for that game, you won't be able to use the Metal Blades with reckless abandon. This also means you run a good chance of running out of items needed to fight Dr. Wily. So, same as the original. With the recent re-release of the games, work was done to reduce the amount of slowdown in those titles. I haven't seen the emulation of the AtGames handheld, but we can assume that it's the same, if not worse. With the Sega Genesis mini version, the slowdown is practically non-existent. Any and all tactics that were adopted with the slowdown in mind will not work. Also, this isn't a goof on my end, the Sega Genesis mini goes for a 4:3 aspect ratio, so that's not my fault. The Retro-Bit release, actually, it looks like this is the version that I've been playing with the whole time. So not full speed like the Sega Genesis mini version, but a lot better than the original. And this is now a little awkward. Retro-Bit, Capcom, sorry for acquiring the game in the way that I did, which I will not mention. I missed the pre-order window. I only did it for the review. I will totally make it up to you by purchasing a spare copy of the collector's edition directly from you, if you have extras laying around. GottaBeFrankbusiness@gmail.com or hit me up on Twitter at GottaBeFrank_. I'm willing to make things right. Back to the comparisons. The Nintendo Switch version appears to be between the Retro-Bit and the Genesis Mini version, so there's still a bit of slowdown, but not as much as the Retro-Bit release. I'm using Iceman and Electman as examples since they are the earliest signs of slowdown, but there's also the Yellow Devil fight. They also make for relatively easy comparisons to get to. Anyways, unlike the NES games, the Wily Wars uses a save feature to keep track of the player's progress. It's done really well. They only go so far as to the start of the first Wily level in each game. Once the player beats one of the games, it'll be tracked, and upon completing all of the games, Wily Tower will be unlocked. This is the reason why it's not in the AtGames version, because there's no save feature, so there's no way to keep track of which game has been beaten. Another reason why I didn't want to get it. Wily's Tower is a smaller experience with characters based on Journey to the West. You're given up to 8 power-ups from the 3 games and use them to take on the Buster Rod G, the Mega Water S, and the Hyperstorm H, the Robot Masters of the game. Thankfully, you can pick and choose the weapons you want before the start of every level. In fact, their levels are a mix between hazards and enemies from the 3 games. They don't come off as overwhelming, and there's some enjoyment from them. Not bad. The bosses are interesting as well. Rather than being the standard bosses in some uninteresting rooms, they each have something that make them stand out. Mega Water S's fight is a flooded room with a platform. In theory, the player can use a rush item to navigate that whole area, but honestly, this fight was really easy without having to maneuver around. We're 0 for 1 on these. Hyperstorm H has a double life bar and will attempt to send you into a wall of spikes, or drop enemies on you. This one's an interesting challenge, so 1 for 2. I don't know why I'm rating these, I'll stop doing that. Finally is Buster Rod G. This one would be another standard fight with slightly more advanced AI, but when their health drops to 1 bar, they flee. The Wily stages work in a similar way. It's a gauntlet that requires players to be adjusted to the game as elements from previous levels will be presented. The Fire Snake is similar to Barba from Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link, where the idea is to attack the head as it rises out of the fire. The platform is a square block, but it has 2 springs coming out the sides, and those springs are going to help you get to the right elevation to attack. But it does come with the downside of being vulnerable in midair. The attack patterns are easy to figure out, so we can move on. The next boss, Iron Ball, would bounce around and shoot lasers similar to Gemini Man's ability. It even includes a slowdown from that attack. But I will say I had the weakness, so I didn't spend too long in here. Buster Rod G returns, but with a Buster weapon to match Mega Man's. I had the weakness for this one as well, and every video that I've seen has also used the weakness. So I really don't know how this fight works outside of the first few seconds, but I can take a guess. The platform will shift around throughout the fight, and I'm guessing the Robot Master will jump at some point. That's all I got. The final battle is a 3-phase boss rather than being a 2-phase and then going into the final boss in an extra stage, so you better have enough E-Tanks ready. It's another cool fight, but again, weakness sort of demolishes it. And with that, Wily Tower is over. Honestly, I think it's a cool addition to the rest of the collection. The levels remind me of the Doc Robot levels in Mega Man 3, but in a good way. Level assets are utilized in challenging, but not overly difficult ways. The bosses were interesting, and the music is surprisingly decent. It's probably the best music in the entire game, though that's because the rest of it was butchered. So, is Mega Man The Wily Wars worth it? It really depends. The visual improvements, while I have one quibble over what was sacrificed, is very pleasing on the eyes, and it has one of my favorite Mega Man sprites. I can't get over the subtle changes with the game feel and the game performance, but then again, Mega Man 1 through 3 was already a hard sell for me. Even then, I would still stick to the original, but the remake isn't too far behind. It's a fairly competent collection that needed more time to optimize the game and slow Electman the hell down, as well as some other tweaks. If you have access to the Wily Wars, hopefully through some legal means, then I'd say it's worth trying out just for the sake of curiosity. The save feature is really nice, the visuals are good on the eyes, and the music exists, and you get a neat side game to wrap up the whole collection. Again, Capcom and Retrobit, I am willing to make things right on the whole ROM thing. If it can't be done, then hopefully paying for the expansion pack will suffice. And that'll just about do it. Hey everyone, thank you for watching today's video. If you've played the Wily Wars, tell me what you thought about it in the comment section down below, and also let me know which version you played. If you enjoyed the video, clicking like and sharing the video around helps out a lot, and subscribing would be nice as well. My channel members and patrons are on screen right now, and I want to give them a huge thank you to them. They really help out the channel in a big way. We're going through a bit of a rework, but if you want to support the channel right now, you can do so with the join button. $1 is the lowest tier, and it gets you a couple of perks. One more thing to note is that I'm moving streams over to an old stream archive channel. The link will be in the description, as well as the top right-hand card. It's going to be called GottaBeFrank Live, and streams are going to be picking up very soon. I have a couple of ideas, and some of them include Mega Man. I also have social media links in the description as well, so you can follow my antics there. And again, I want to thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful and safe day. And until next time, take care.